If you want to, you can use it, you don't have to, of course. And this is the other institution who's not.
Okay. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the regular Comox Valley Regional District Board meeting of Tuesday, October 17th, 2023 to order. So just a few housekeeping things. Can you hear me? Okay. Is that any better? Can you increase the volume? Is that better? That's cranked up as far as it'll go, I think. Okay, is that better?
So we'll have to use our theater voices. Just a good reason to have Bob Wells on board.
Okay. Is that any better now? Okay, so just a few housekeeping items. We have a full house tonight, so we want to go over what we do in case of emergency. You have 2 exits on this side of the room, and you have the exit where you entered the building. And the marshalling station is behind you in the parking lot. And if any of you need to use the washroom facilities, you can use the entrance door you came in, go back down the hallway, and the washrooms are behind the boardroom and the lunchroom. Okay, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation, and we're very grateful for their past and present stewardship. And we continue along our path toward reconciliation. Part of that is educating ourselves on the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. And today we have call to action 33, and it's on justice. We call upon the federal, provincial, and territorial governments to recognize as a high priority the need to address and prevent fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and to develop, in collaboration with Aboriginal people, FASD prevention or preventative programs that can be delivered in a culturally appropriate manner. Thank you for that. And I would actually like to propose that we vary the agenda to bring forward the item that I think many of the members of the gallery are here for. And that is item G3, the rezoning for Saratoga. Moved by Director Hillian, seconded by Morin. Any discussion on the variance? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. We'll bring that forward now. So this is under bylaws, bylaw number 683, the Rural Comox Valley Zoning Bylaw, number 520, 2019, amendment number 8. Moved by Grieve. Seconded by Cole Hamilton. Any further discussion? Director Arbor, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This is an issue that we've had for a couple of years before the board. Obviously, we've moved through the readings and we're now in adoption. I would just restate my reasons for why I believe this should be turned down by the area directors. I won't go over as much as I did at length in terms of the public feedback we received on this one. That was done at the last meeting. But let's just recap what this bylaw is about. It's about having the racetrack now be zoned as primary use rather than secondary use. Secondary use put the racetrack as legally non-conforming, which from my read of the Local Government Act would hint at limiting the use to historical level, whereas primary use will provide the opportunity to have more events as determined by the operators. The bylaw does not mandate noise parameters, new noise parameters beyond the very basic measures passed in 2022. After receiving hundreds, if not thousands, of emails and pieces of correspondence on the noise issues, I'm incredulous that this bylaw would get passed without an amendment that addresses maximum levels of noise. Many other jurisdictions around North America and in BC have introduced such requirements, and some in locations actually more removed from residential communities. For the campground, it will allow for the maximum amount of campsites initially requested. I believe that following the first time this bylaw was introduced and after hearing that from the community, maybe there was interest in adjusting that number or looking at fewer campsites. We've heard concerns about water, etc. None of these were proposed as amendment. We're really dealing with the initial bylaw from 2 years ago. So I would encourage my colleagues to vote against adoption, which will allow, as I mentioned at the last meeting, the opportunity for the applicant to work on a revised proposal that won't prove as dividing to the community as the bylaw that is proposed before us. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Please refrain from any clapping. Is there any further discussion? Director Grieve?
Thank you. And, I appreciate the opinion of the other director. My personal opinion is that a lot of these issues that have been in play can be addressed through the development permit phase. I think that we've got a proposal before us that is far from completed, and I'd like to see it move on, and I'm going to support it. Thank you very much.
Please, no comments from the gallery. Okay, Director Hardy?
Yeah.
Stop, please. We'll have to remove you.
Point of order, Chair. Again, I think we're conducting business here and having comments from the gallery. I'm not so sure if that's permissive or not, but anyways, in regards to my decision revolving around the bylaw, I think as Director Harbour had mentioned, this has been an item that's been up for discussion for a number of years. The noise bylaw was voted upon by the previous board of directors. And really, I don't see much of a change in regards to the bylaw other than we're allowing for some camping activities as a primary use here. I don't see anything in the bylaw itself that is out of the ordinary with regards to the activities that are permitted or have been permitted up there for a long time other than the camping. With regards to water, with regards to dealing with septic, I think the proponent and from the reports that I've read have shown that those issues have been dealt with or will be getting dealt with. So I'll be supporting the bylaw. Thanks.
Okay. We've heard from the area directors. It is a vote of the areas only. All in favor? Any opposed? Director Harbour opposed, and the motion's carried. Okay, we'll take a recess so that those who wish to leave from the gallery can leave. We'll come back in 2 minutes. Please, we don't Please don't approach the directors. Okay. I assume that those who are leaving have left. And the remainder want to stay for the rest of the meeting. So we'll resume. Okay, the adoption of minutes from September 26th and October 10th. Moved by Grieve, seconded by Cole Hamilton. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. And moving on to delegations. Thank you. We have a delegation from Kentwood Properties, Dr. Royanne Petrel. And here we also have Rachel Denise. And yes, welcome. You have 10 minutes to present. And then questions if you would like after. And that was moved, was it moved by Killian or seconded by Arbor? Okay.
Thank you for allowing me to make this presentation today for us. I'm here today to ask to create a new park called Generation Nature Park. Also, I'm asking the board to pay for that park or to set aside money or to find money for this park. Next, please. I think it's easier for you to go. Should I try it? Huh? There are many benefits to this park. One, it adds access and connectivity to the Royston Cumberland Railroad Trail. Cyclists, hikers, birders, which I am one, horseback riders, and dog walkers will use the trails, the existing trails, to go from Kentwood to the railroad trail. It also protects old cedar forest that's approaching 90 years old based on its rings. And that's also will possibly provide cedar for cultural reasons, and that will be brought up later. It drains 2 sensitive wetlands, and it has a huge amount of carbon, and it's the only existing forest of its kind in the area. This is just a snapshot of what it looks like as you walk through. Where is it located? It's 31 acres off of Kentwood Road. Kentwood Road comes off of Royston Road. Royston Road, where we're located, is near Cumberland. However, we're still in Royston. Most importantly, it abuts on the south and eastern side, the Royston Cumberland Railroad Trail. And down below, the waters from here all enter into the Trent River. These are this slide shows the sensitive habitats. One, this is coming from the regional, your sensitive habitat map, shows 2 sensitive wetlands, one coming off the park, off the highway, and another one actually in the corner of the proposed park. This is the map of the first creek. This creek drains the wetland from the highway, goes through a natural forest onto Kentwood Road and through the forest, round and about to a beaver dam wetland area and into the Trent River. You can notice on the slide that the forestry company, when they logged, left a buffer around the creek as it passed, when it passed over the railroad trail. This is a picture of it, what it looks like in August. It's very wet. And very wet in August, and that's what supports this very healthy cedar forest. It's very, very wet. About the 90s, early 80s, 90s, before my time on the street, highways came in there, dug this deep down, so it looks like a ditch, but it's really not a ditch. It was dug down then because it was flooding Kentwood Road. As you can see from there, it's huge amount of organic materials. It's very, very deep and rich organic. That shows that this had been a wetland for a very long period of time. This is a second stream. The second stream comes, starts draining the sensitive wetland down in the corner of the proposed park. And as it goes up towards where it comes out of the park, proposed park, it actually is it's a complete wetland. It's completely wet. This is what that one looks like. It's according to the new document published by the provincial government about wetlands. This is considered to be a cedar skunk cabbage swamp. And as you can see from the slides, it's slated to be, there's flagging up. And this is the real reason I'm here today, for the urgency, because it could be logged any day. And so that's why I came here today as soon as I could. And it's the last one in the area. There's nothing, it's the biggest, there's the last second growth forest, aging second growth forest in the area, but it's only, I think it's the only healthy cedar forest in the whole area. There's a huge amount of community support for this proposal. And fortunately for me, at this point of time, I have people doing votes up to preserve the Kentwood Forest. This is coming out of the engaged Comox Valley as they decide what land is going to be protected and where. And this is coming out, so neighbors and everyone have going on to the website and putting thumbs up for this proposal. BC Nature gives it the highest priority for preservation. And why is that? It's because it's cedar. Cedar is very, very susceptible to climate change. And the cultural values it's going to have, as well as the fact that it's situated right next to our existing park. So it's actually administratively a lot easier to handle. It's not an isolated park, it's right next to our existing park. So it's, and it also gives access to that park. Comox, Comox Valley Nature, Dr. John Nielsen is here. He wanted to point out all those other aspects, but he also wanted to point out that there's no other parks. There's hardly any parks south of Courtenay. So this would be addition to something that's really been missing. And the Fish and Wildlife have told me, oh, this is essential to protect the salmon, to give water and nutrients to the salmon on the Trent River. And Backcountry Horsemen of North Vancouver Island, they walk up and down Kentwood and they love that access onto the railroad trail. And this is probably one of the biggest support we have is Comox Valley Land Trust has told me they have time now to work on a project after they have worked on Morrison Creek, finished that, and some other ones. They can work on this project and they could write a letter of intent if this board agrees that they could, and they could then say in there that, until you get the money, would you not log it? And they have the time and effort to do it right now. Now, I would like to introduce, so this will be for generations to come, but now I think the most important reason for why I want the park is what Rachel's going to say.
Chakmen Wahath, Chenwa ATT, Skohamish Nathan Hojkahosiam. Hello, respectful greetings. Thank you for having me here today. I'm very honored to be sharing a little bit about why I'm here. I am from the Squamish Nation, so I'm happily living on my ancestral territories of Coast Salish. I'm the founder of Four Sacred. So I'm a wild harvester and I infuse 4 sacred indigenous plants into skincare and salve to help with pain and inflammation. So cedar is not only widely recognized and respected amongst indigenous peoples in traditions, culture, and our heritage. It's part of our ceremony. It's part of our cleansing that we do in our potlatches. And without further ado, I would like to share a poem that I wrote. This is pertaining to my skincare. It's called Cedarwood Dew, created a moisturizer for your skin with cedar in it. It goes, "Oh, great cedar, how you make my skin so hydrated, nourished, and rejuvenated. You stand tall and carry strength and wisdom. I respectfully acknowledge all you have given to us in ceremony, clothing, hats, and homes. Thank you, old wise cedar, for sharing your ancient healing traditions and medicine. And now you offer once more a place of nourishment and protection to our skin, our largest organ. I have so much gratitude and appreciation for all the shelters, homes, and food you offer to the 4-legged, 2-legged, winged, and finned. Hochika Hosiam, thank you."
Thank you so much. Okay, are you open to questions? We have a question from Director Arbor. Go ahead.
This is, well, question / comment, and maybe a question. So first of all, thank you so much for coming and presenting today. And I have to tell the board I had the opportunity to do a little bit of a walk around in that area. And indeed, it's well, first of all, the whole Trent River watershed, in my opinion, it's due for a designation as a conservation area where we could build partnerships with others. There's people, different people that live along the Trent River, and that idea keeps coming back in the community. We know on the other side of the Trent River will be, if treaty goes through, will be Comox lands. But beyond that, it's near urban. To me, it's as valuable as the Pontledge. And so with this piece, I think it's great because what you're proposing is for this board to put its mind to how we could actually assist and enhance the park we already have. As you say, it was difficult to establish, that predates me, but to establish the Royston to Cumberland Trail using the old railroad. And you're correct, this piece of property abuts it. I believe, I'm not sure if you said in your presentation, I think the owner is Mosaic, is that correct?
That's right.
And we deal with Mosaic Forest Management, a number of issues across the valley. And I can see how, from a timber's perspective, having seen the cedar in that area, that would be very valuable. And I'm not surprised to see falling tapes on that block, what they would consider a block, what you consider a nature park. So I think I would be keen if later on, we usually don't make decisions, but I would be keen later on to ask staff to investigate this opportunity a little more, and maybe even have a conversation with Mosaic around their intent. And so we have a better sense of parameters, and maybe to come back with the board around options around how we could help preserve this small section of forest. And also with an eye, in my opinion, in the long term, to how we can help preserve the area as a whole. I'll just finish by sharing that I've heard that Mosaic is starting to not replant cedar trees because of the climate trend. And my question back would be, well, if there's an opportunity especially in as wet an area where the cedar has actually a chance to keep growing, I think if you want to reestablish it, then you probably want to work with a working forest, like with an intact forest, rather than clear cut it and then it all becomes dry again, and probably you won't see cedar there again. So letting it standing, I think, to me would be the better option. So I'm so thankful that you came and shared that initiative with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Director Morin.
Great, thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for the presentation. This is the kind of presentation that kind of gives me shivers, actually,
Oh, good. Is that good?
in a good way. I love the connection to Cedar. I've had the benefit of being part of some cultural teachings around Cedar, really understand the value of saving what we have. I know that in Courtney, when we were doing our OCP, we talked about the importance of preserving medicinal and cultural healing ceremonial plants in our forests. And to me, I just really appreciate that you brought that forward. And I think many of us, when we had the vision of a regional park service, there's many reasons, and I think you're the first presentation we've actually had around a specific piece of land that could potentially be part of that or something else. But you know, these are the kinds of things that I think really capture the vision of what we're looking for in terms of the climate resilience, the cultural piece, obviously the hopefully somewhat passive recreation. I noticed there is some horse folks there, but and the point that you made that we don't have any parks in south of Courtney like that. So I just wanted to say all that because I'm kind of moved by the presentation. I did wonder if you have had any information come forward. This is a bit in line with Director Arbor's question around any cost of this land. And I just also wanted to say I'm thrilled that you've been connected with Comox Valley Land Trust, because of course they've been very successful. Many of us have contributed to some of those other acquisitions and in various forms. So yeah, if you have any information about that.
So basically, Tim Innes told me that what happens under this circumstance, it's now been passed into the real estate division, which I said that was good. He said that's bad. So what happens is that you pay for the profits only. So you have to pay for the profits of the trees, but because it has been passed to the real estate division, you have to pay for the profits of any development. However, because it's so wet and there's so many wetlands in the streams, I don't think there's going to be that much land to develop. Project Watershed said at that time they come into play and they will look at the streams, and they're very strict about keeping people away from wetlands, but they can't enter it until there's a letter of intent.
Great, thank you very much. I'll let others chime in. Thank you.
Thanks. Next, we have Director Kerr.
Yes, thank you for the presentation to you both and to everyone in the gallery who's here supporting your presentation. It's probably not a shock that I'm very supportive of this, and I would love to see this remain as it is and become a park. I guess a question to the chair would be like next steps. There's questions around, could this be looked at as part of the regional parks service? How this board or the park service could request that the area isn't logged while that is being discussed and evaluated, whether it could be brought into the park service. So maybe just to your wisdom, Chair, of how to proceed. Thanks.
Yeah, I think I'll pass that over to the CAO. I think he probably has some ideas on what options staff might want to bring back to the following meeting.
Thanks. And I think as the board knows, the Regional Parks and Trails Committee is just beginning its strategic planning work to really define what is that service. What does the Regional Parks and Trails service look like? Is it about acquiring large new tracts of land? Is it about managing land that is already in the public realm? Is it about greenways? Is it about protecting the space for conservation values or recreation values? So I think those are all questions that the Regional Parks and Trails Committee will be looking at, and they'll be undertaking that work. They're doing that already, and there's been some engagement with community groups and some different stakeholders. So that work isn't done yet. So I can't tell you what the Regional Parks and Trails Committee would do with something like this. From the regional district's perspective, we also have our electoral areas A, B, and C park service, and that's just in the rural areas, and that would be a place that could consider the acquisition of land. it has acquired parcels in the past. I think if the board today was interested in asking staff to have some discussion with Mosaic, I suppose, then those would be some conversations that we could have just to understand a little bit more about values and timing, and then could present that as some consideration for the board. I don't know what kind of timing is at play here, so hard to give you much more than that. But if the board is interested in having a conversation like that and just getting some more information, we can do that, and then that might help to illustrate what options are in front of the board.
Thanks, Director Arbour.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I very much like the CEO suggestion, and I think the concern, and that's why we're seeing a delegation like that, is when the flags are up. I think that's why I would like, if the chair allows under new business, to provide some direction for us to proceed in that manner and maybe even report back to ESC. Just to first determine the urgency. If the machines are going in Tuesday, that might be a different conversation than if we hear that there's appetite to actually look at alternatives or otherwise. So if that's fine, it sounds like from James' comments, so that would be fine to bring that under new business and provide that direction, and then to obviously stay in touch with the group that has brought this forward.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate. Thank you. Director Grant.
Yeah, thank you. It's too bad you aren't here about 2.5 years from now, because our regional park service just, it's not functional yet. We brought it in for exactly what you're trying to do here. And there's all sorts of things that still have to go on it. But my question is, do you have an estimate of the value? Like, what would we be looking at? Have you got any idea, or?
No, that's why I asked Comox Valley Land Trust, because they do this all the time, right? They're really experts in it. And so, he said they wouldn't be able to do it until they actually be able to get the go ahead and they could go in there. And they also have good experience speaking with Mosaic.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it could be worth very little, or it could be worth a pile, just depending on,
I don't know.
whatever. So, yeah. Okay.
But we just get the profits, right? We don't.
Yes,
Okay.
of course. Yeah. Thank you.
Dr. Robert.
I'll just leave it out there based on Director Grant's comment. This is way above what we could ever afford, but I'm actually interested in sometimes some type of conservation around all the lands that Mosaic owns in that triangle on this side of the inland highway. I know the CFCP bridge is maintained specifically for, it was put in at the time to access those logging parcels, but I think they have lots of land, and so if the CV Land Trust is even able to assess what the fuller package looks like, I would encourage staff to even explore that, even if it's a brief exploration.
For the other lands that he's speaking about, Mosaic can't log them because the railroad trail, they don't have access to cross over it. And so there's a whole bunch of lands from behind my house to that trail, which they can't log, but they have logged already. And much of it is wetlands. That's the one he's referring to.
Okay, I don't see any further lights, so thank you so much for your presentation. And we'll be discussing again under new business. Okay. Moving on to reports. Oh, sorry. Yes, receipts, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Now reports. So Comox Valley Transit Management Advisory Committee minutes from September 12th. Moved by McCullum, seconded by Moran. Any discussion of those minutes? Okay. All in favor of receipt of the minutes? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. The electoral area minutes from September 26th, moved by Grieve, seconded by Grant. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. And recreation minutes from September 26th, Moved by Cole Hamilton, seconded by Grant. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. And we're on to Electoral Service Area Committee minutes from October 16th. Oh, not the minutes. Oh, just the recommendation. Okay, so the recommendation moved by Grant, seconded by Arbor. And the recommendation is that the 2023-2027 financial plan and capital expenditure program for Hornby Island Community Parks and Greenways Service be amended and increased by 515,000. And any further discussion? Okay, it's a vote of the full board. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. And that takes us to the Growing Communities Fund allocation. Moved by Arbor, seconded by Hillian. And does staff want to speak to this?
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. So Lucy Wicharek, our Chief Financial Officer, will be presenting some background information on this staff report. And then a few of us from your executive team are available for any questions that you might have. So Lucy, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Lisa. So through the acting CAO to the chair and to the directors, we have prepared some information to assist the board today in finalizing the Growing Communities Grant Fund allocation. So the province announced this grant funding in February of this year, and the CVRD received these funds at the end of March. So just quickly to just touch on the timelines to date. At April 13th meeting of VASC, staff provided allocation recommendations based on a set of established criteria that met the program requirements and supports board priorities. The committee considered the recommendations and at that time deferred any allocation decisions to the future meeting. The CVRD board was provided with a verbal update on April 18th. And then at the May 8th and the 15th meeting of VAC, the committee received a bit of further information and allocated a portion of the funds. At the May 23rd CVRD board meeting, a status report was provided at that time. And the board deferred any subsequent decisions on allocating the remaining $1.6 million of the Growing Community Funds until after the board's strategic planning session was held. So this table, it's in your report. I'm not going to go through it line by line, but it just shows us the allocations to date. I think we're pretty familiar with these projects, and these are related to rural and electoral areas. So with the 2023-2026 strategic planning work completed and endorsed, the board may want to consider allocations of the remaining funds to key projects directly tied to strategy. So just a few key points just to keep in mind while considering the use of these funds. The principal objective of this grant is to strengthen housing supply and local government support, oftentimes new development, primarily through investments in infrastructure like those roads, water, sewer, and also through community amenities such as the fire halls and recreation parks, etc. So for this grant, it's just important to keep in mind that we must own the assets that are being contemplated in our projects. So projects to consider that align with grant requirements that would benefit from additional grant dollars include the construction of the sewer extension south, implementation of a project within the active transportation network plan, and or implementation of the CVRD recreation strategic plan. So just came back to your endorsed strategy documents, went through the initiatives and just bringing forward these few here that really align well with what the grant intent is. Staff we understand the importance of the board strategy for non-market housing and recognize the discussions that have been had around allocating the funds to this initiative. So as staff, we considered this, however, with this priority being new, with no action plan developed yet, we just could not make an assumption at this time that the CVRD would proceed in a way that would align with this grant requirements. So we don't have direction from the board at this point in time to be able to rely on information that would make it aligned, but we recognize that that's obviously a very important priority to this board as well. So options, the board may want to allocate the fund to a project aligned to the endorse strategy, and that brings benefit to the region and or supports foundational infrastructure needed to increase housing supply within the borders of Comox Valley and KFN. Amongst those priorities, as I mentioned, so sewer extension project aligns, as does active transportation network or regional recreation initiatives. The board may also want to take the $1.6 million and fund just one of those strategic priorities that's of a regional nature, and examples of that would include the Cumberland to Courtney connector or the new artificial turf field. The staff recommendation to seize the funds allocated across the three broad regional priorities of the board. For the grant dollars to that South Sewer Extension project, this certainly will assist with the successful implementation of this important initiatives. The project addresses environmental factors, economic factors, and facilitates future market and non-market housing development, which supports that overall regional need. The project supports growth in the area identified as a core settlement area and also supports Comox in their economic development objective. So that's what we have for you today, and the board can also. I'm so sorry, I just lost my place for a minute. So our staff recommendations is $1 million to go to the South Sewer Extension project, and then recommending 300,000 to your active transportation network plan, and that's for the Cumberland to Courtney connector, and also $317,000 to allocate to the new artificial turf. And we are open for any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Lucy. We do have some questions, starting with Director Kerr.
Yes, thanks for the report. I mean, I think all three of those are worthwhile. I'm struggling a little bit with the South Sewer Extension $1 million, just because later we'll be talking about all the awards that have been awarded, and there's already a $30 million grant going towards that. I mean, it's like a kind of a drop in the bucket. Whereas if we took a lot of that and put it towards the connector or the recreational turf field, it would be like a much bigger piece of those two smaller projects. So I'd prefer to put more of the funding towards those two projects, because we already have a $30 million grant going towards that. Not that it's not important. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for that feedback. Next, we have Director McCollum.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the report. Yeah, I have similar thoughts on the South Sewer Extension, that it has already received a $30 million grant, and that it does have less of a regional impact than the other projects that are listed here. It would be hard for me to justify the direct benefit to residents outside of the South as to why we would choose that project over something that people within the city of Courtney can utilize on a regular basis. The other two in the list do seem to meet that criteria. One concern I do have around using it for the active transportation network plan is I saw a bullet in the government documents on these funds that said that you can use Growing Communities funds for active transportation projects, but not if they are granted through other senior levels of government grants. So my question is, if we allocate $300,000 of Growing Communities funds, does that mean that we can't apply for the active transportation grant from the province? And without having any sense of how costly this project would be, I'm not really clear how much we would be, how much we're envisioning that $300,000 would cover. So that's a question for me. And the other question I had is just whether we have any updates on the artificial turf field costing. I know we're in escalate inflationary environment where cost escalations seem to be pretty consistent or predictable in some ways. So if staff could maybe comment on whether or not the numbers that we contemplated during strategic planning are fairly reflective of what we're expecting, or if there's been changes since we last talked about it.
I see that Jennifer Spinden has raised her hand online, so maybe we'll give her the opportunity to speak to the turf field, which I think is what she's wanting to do.
Through the chair, thank you. Hopefully everybody can hear me well.
We can. It's loud, actually.
Oh, okay. I'll try to be quieter. So we do have a Class D estimate, and that estimate did come came back a touch higher than what we had anticipated, and that's at 6.8 million. And to clarify, that doesn't include any washroom facilities or a water fountain. Those are probably two pretty big key items. And should we fold in washrooms and and a water fountain, we're looking just north of 7 million, around the 7.5 million mark. Staff are currently working with the design and with the consultant to look to see if there's some areas that maybe, might not need to be done, or is there any way to put some savings in there. And then after that, we'll also be meeting with the user groups one more time just to kind of review their needs. And, if you want to make it a true community field, we want to make sure that we meet everybody's needs, but maybe not exceed and go to all the love to haves, but stick with the need to haves.
Wow, yeah, that's a higher number than what I was expecting to hear. Thanks for that context. I guess I'll just make the final point in response to the recommendation, and specifically around the South Sewer extension, that I think when the board talked about our priorities through strategic planning and when we've had discussions around this grant in the past, the interest has been in supporting affordable housing, affordability, non-market housing. I've never heard support for simply increasing housing stock. And this project that is listed in this recommendation is really around single family housing. And I don't know of any examples in recent years where increasing the supply of single family homes has really impacted affordability. So I would much rather see that money either go towards actual affordability, not simply supply, or be used for a project that has a greater impact to the region in terms of access and direct benefit. Thanks.
Okay, and not to forget your other question about stacking of grants for the active transportation.
Yeah. So through the chair, my understanding is that there was no issue with this grant with stacking. I can't put my fingers right on it, but I don't recall Kevin. Do you have something, Kevin, that you found it? So he's thank you, Kevin. Mm-hmm.
Through the chair and say to the director. So yeah, I think what Director McCollum is referring to is the letter we originally received with respect to the grant. And there is a bullet that speaks to active transportation amenities not funded by existing provincial programs. So that would be an area we would want to get clarity as to whether that means we wouldn't have the option of pursuing additional grants in relation to, say, a project that might be funded under Current Community. So definitely something we'll take away and try to confirm.
Okay, thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. And next we have Director Moore.
Great, thank you, Chair. Director McCollum definitely touched on some of the sentiments that I have. I recall in strategic planning a fairly strong consensus around non-market housing, wanting to move the dial on housing. I do understand the point that we don't have anything kind of shovel ready right now. I know that the City of Courtenay did allocate some of their growing community funds to affordable housing. And I did clarify today that we don't have a specific project, but we've allocated that money so that it's ready to go. I don't think we're going to have trouble using it within the 5 years. And I guess my thoughts are around whether we could have more leverage or be able to combine some funds throughout the region to truly look at the non-market housing. I obviously can't speak for Courtney, but I know that Courtney would be interested in collaboration and partnerships. You know, non-market housing could go somewhere within the region. It wouldn't have to be in Courtney as long as it was close to amenities and transportation, etc. If Comox First Nation was ready with some ideas around non-market housing in Southlands, that might be something, but I don't think that they would be ready within that time frame. So I'm pretty lukewarm on the 1 million going to the Southlands for that reason. My understanding is that it is the zoning's already there. There's nothing in there that has, you know, that has identified non-market. It's a car dependent community. I probably have other points, but I'll let other people speak. But I would say that we have folks who are working in service jobs in our seniors care facilities, in our social services. I know from experience, those folks don't get paid a lot of money. They're taking care of vulnerable, aging. The hospitals need lots of staff, and we don't have housing for people. And we don't have housing for people who actually make not a bad wage. So I would really love to see more attention to the non-market housing. The homes in that area, I mean, maybe Director Arbor or somebody else has more information, but they're going to be expensive homes in that area. And they're not going to move the dial on what we need, which is housing for people who are serving our community and trying to work here. And I just think that our focus is not really where it's not really aligned with what we discussed in strat planning. And I think there is potential to partner with the rest of the region if we were to pool this money together. So I don't know if my understanding is that it can be, from the regional district's perspective, this grant funding can be used in that way in partnerships, as long as we owned the asset or whatever. So I don't know. I'll leave it at that. I might have a couple more comments or questions after. Thanks.
Yeah, maybe just to Lucy, if you could expand a little more on staff's thinking around the affordable housing aspect and why that wasn't one of the options.
Okay, so purely from that point of, is there something that is included in a direction from the board that from an allocation of this fund perspective, is it in line with what the eligibility criteria? So with that not being laid out by this board yet, that's the reason why it's not in your report. We talked about it a lot, we imagined a lot, just didn't feel that we had anything coming from the board right now in order to be able to put forward in this report. Yes, this can be used. From just to answer the question a bit more from Director Morin around, can we collaborate across our local governments in order to do something in that place of non-market housing? Absolutely. From an ownership perspective, the assets need to be owned by the regional district. If there's a service that the municipality is contributed into, that's spelled out black and white in the eligibility pieces of this particular grant. So that is an option. And totally can understand from a Courtney perspective that they are saying, yes, we want to be using this fund, some of these funds or all of these funds to make a difference in this space. And they don't have everything fleshed out right now. But I think as I read the reporting requirements through again, that likely by the end of the year, that this board would have to be saying, this is what our initiative is. And it's okay if it's just the beginning pieces of initiative, but we would have to say, what we were doing with it, and then that needs to go into the year-end reporting around this grant.
So these funds have to be allocated by the end of December.
Correct.
If the board wanted more information or to investigate another option, do we still have time to do that and bring it back?
Depends how deep that investigation needs to be, but I believe we can, and acting CEO can comment.
I think we'd really want to understand what other information is needed and what analysis the board is looking for to help answer those questions. The recommendation here is trying to thread the needle with respect to this opportunity for grant funding and addressing some of the principles that are in the initial offer from the province. And to the point of the strategic planning, certainly recognizing that importance of non-market housing. Unfortunately, we're not at that place yet where we can determine there would be assets owned by the CVRD within the 5-year timeframe to spend the money. And so recognizing that non-market housing is that priority, there isn't that opportunity to allocate the funds right now. So so we're trying to identify these projects as being worthy of the board's attention. As the report says, though, it's certainly up to the board in terms of defining what make up the dollars go to the projects. And to your point, if there's a referral needed, then we would just like to understand what is the information you need to have us come back.
Okay, I think what I'm hearing so far is around the active transportation network and making sure that we wouldn't be shooting ourselves in the foot by contributing to it and not making ourselves ineligible for a grant. And then the other aspect is what type of collaboration can we have with the other local governments around their assets, and what could be worked out to further the regional district's goal of non-market housing.
So can I just ask one question on that last piece around the assets owned by another local government? Lucy, can you confirm whether that's an opportunity? I think we looked at that as a possibility of contributing these funds to another local government, and whether or not that's allowed under this grant, or do the assets need to be still owned by the CVRD?
The way that I'm reading it is the assets need to be owned by the CVRD. The municipality is participating in a service on the CVRD. That's the way it's reading.
Okay, Director Arbor, go ahead.
Thanks. I did not expect those kinds of comments tonight, so I'm just sharpening my brain here. As a refresher, why the board has selected South Sewer as a strategic priority for the last 4 years. So I would remind the board that the first large contribution to the homelessness service, which you are all proud of and want to contribute to, was a $250,000 contribution by Union Bay Estates in 2018. Unlocking the potential of Union Bay Estates in the amenity agreement is a number of commitments around contribution to affordable housing. So whether it be lots or dollars, those are included. There's also ongoing discussions with the developer whether the final form of the development is really what is going to be happening or not in regards to the comment around single residential homes. I think there's a moving concept, and more importantly than that, though, I would say I would remind the board that why this is a key priority is, and that was brought up shortly by Dr. Morin, is First Nation housing. This development is going to unlock opportunity for our First Nation members and is a key component of our reconciliation platform with Comox First Nation, which this board has reiterated. We have partnered to attract funding from the province and from a developer. There's a significant amount of money that is coming to the project, and it's certainly not because we are trying to subsidize single family homes by rich homeowners. I just want to clarify that. If the board wants to revisit our commitment to the project, I think we should have that conversation in depth. In regards to the 1 million, the difference it will make, it may seem, as Dr. McCollum said, like a drop in the bucket when you consider the 30 million which the province has committed to the project. Union Bay Estates is on the verge of committing 20 million to the project, and Comox First Nation itself is committing 8. So we are right on this $60-70 million project. $1 million doesn't sound like a lot. let me tell you why I would advocate for this board to actually consider this allocation today. Is because the residents, the existing residents of Royston and Union Bay are currently on the hook for $5 or $6 million to connect their grid. That $1 million would directly reduce their share. This week at EASC, we received a report that with all the pressures in the south, taxes for Royston residents and Union Bay residents that would be in the service area are slated to go up to $6,000 a year from $3,000, right? So that's about 500 or 600 homes. If you divide that $1 million, every dollar will count to gain the support of those residents to support this project and to make it a goal. And I would say that the board should not feel that comfortable that it's a given that this project will go through. I believe every dollar we put into it is a dollar well invested that ensures and guarantees a successful project that will benefit the environment, will benefit First Nations, and in regards to affordable housing, will unlock a huge amount of either dollar contribution or affordable housing lots to the Comox Valley region as a whole. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Next, we have Director Grant.
Yeah, thank you. Well, those were a lot of the questions I was going to ask because I wanted to know how important the $1 million would be to that project and whether it would have a significant impact or not. And it sounds like it would. So my other question, it may be a silly one, but can you buy something with this money that would become a regional district property? And I'm thinking of, say, a 31-acre park on Kemper Road.
Yes, you can buy something with these dollars. It just can't be land banking type things.
No, but if we wanted to have a park, could we put that $1 million towards something like that if we chose to? Okay, thank you.
And Director Cole-Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I would support referring this back along the lines, Chair, that you were summarizing a few minutes ago of some of the questions that we have. And I think that the focus on developing non-market rental housing could possibly be in collaboration with the municipality, or it could be work that we're doing ourselves. I'd just like to hear what options are available for the $1 million within the time frame that we have that focus on that very specific goal that I think we were quite agreed upon at strategic planning. And I can appreciate some of the points that Director Harbour is making, that I'd rather this money was going more directly towards that very specific goal than perhaps indirectly. And while I can see the benefit to Area A residents who might be experiencing a tax increase, this is not really, I think, what this fund was for, was to provide tax relief to a finite portion of residents within the entire Comox Valley. Anyway, I just would support a referral back to staff for that kind of report. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we have Director Kerr.
Yeah, no, realizing it's mid-October and, these decisions need to be made soon, and that a lot of work has already gone into this. Another option would be to say, well, we know we're building a new artificial turf field. That's the direction of the board. We just heard the cost estimate, which is shocking. We don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot by not being able to get another grant for the active transportation network plan. And there's not, complete consensus around the table about supporting another drop in the bucket for the South Sewer extension. Perhaps a way forward is just to allocate the full 1.617 million towards the artificial turf field. Less work for staff to have to do another report. We know we got to come up with that money at some point anyway, and it does satisfy the goals of this grant. So another option to chew on, and if we get to making a motion, I would make something to that effect. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we have Director McCollum.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks again, Chair. I would say I'm kind of leaning towards Director Kerr's suggestion as well. Just also looking at the suggestion for the multi-use path and thinking that we don't really have a timeline on that project. We don't have a preferred route that I know of, or any cost estimate. It's just a ways off. South Sewer, I've raised what my concerns are around that, and also just taking note that Area A has received over $2 million of the 4.5 roughly that we're contemplating. So that does directly benefit a reduction in taxes in that area. So that's also a factor. And then the third point I want to make is that these monies are worth more spent now than later. We're in an inflationary environment where costs are escalating. And if we put funds away to use in, a project that's happening 2 or 3 years away, it will simply buy less. And we do have a project in this list here that we are proceeding with that has a cost and will be spent in the near term. So I want to make that point as well. So so I'm leaning towards putting it all towards the artificial turf. Although Cumberland hasn't joined the service yet, it sounds like it's supported, and that's something that everybody at this table pays into. So
we did discuss it at council in Cumberland last night, and we're asking for more information on the updated costs of the artificial turf. Next, we have Director Grieve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With all the greatest respect, partnership is a two-way street. We're representing 3,000 or 30,000 people in the Comox Valley with $4,497. And out of that money, Area C is getting a whopping $600,000 to build a fire hall up in Mount Washington. I just want to know, how much money did Courtney receive from this grant funding? How much money went to Comox? So where does the electoral areas get any say in how they spend their money? As it is, a huge portion of this is going to community benefits. And when you talk about the South Sewer project, I think that is imperative to get that moving forward. I think we already realized that, the First Nations are depending on it. We realize that there is agreements with the developer to create some low-cost housing or donations in kind. So just to put it in perspective, I'm asking staff if they actually have the figure of what Courtney got, what Comox got, what Cumberland got in comparison. And we're sharing this. It's not necessarily the Courtney Regional District. Thank you.
What I can reflect on the amount of funding that was provided to the regional district and the formula that was used to provide funds to all regional districts. And it does incorporate both a rural component and a shared municipal rural component for those services and pieces of infrastructure that do provide services across the rural areas and municipalities. So in this report, there is a breakout of the funding that was noted for the rural areas and a breakout of funding that was noted for more regional broad-based services. And I think that's what the report speaks to here.
We don't have
Our staff report speaks to the contribution to the CVRD.
Next, we have Director Arbor.
Yeah, thanks. I actually thought this item would go quick, but no, it may end up with a referral. I think there's a lot of options that are presented here, and then the staff also presented other options, other projects that could be considered, and then we get the surprises. The suggestion for the artificial turf, that is shocking to me, that what was going to be a $2 million project is now slated at 6 or 7 million, when this was not a unanimous vote to move forward with the capital strategy at recreation, and now to suggest to put all the funding in it. I think that when we start looking at our pure interests, things start to fall apart a little bit. And I think this is a balance. I didn't have any influence in these recommendations. Staff went through a grid of priorities, projects. The recreation, the turf field, the argument that it's coming in the short term, we're 3 years later and the field house is still not built. And we just have a cost escalation of close to 500%. This is not happening in the next year. I think that we're necessarily building this artificial turf field. So I'm just saying, right? There's I'm not attached if the board decides not to put $1 million in the South Shore extension. I will continue to fight for the project. I will explain to KFN that the arguments that were put forward here, that, you know, it's other priorities are being identified, and that's fine. For me, I see this project as not a project to benefit Area A residents. A lot of my drive has been around the First Nation interest and actually resolving some of the long-standing environmental issues around Bain Sound, which residents and many conservationists care about. Yeah, I won't take offense with some of the comments, but they were surprising to me. Thanks, Chair.
Next, we have Director Morin.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I would like to have more information about the potential for non-market housing in the South. I know Director Arbor shared there's some contributions in mind, but I also thought there were some things that were finalized that didn't flesh out specifically anything along those lines. So it would be good to get a bit more information. I just wanted to say that when we were all awarded this money, and I thought I had, Director Grieve, I thought I had the figures in front of me because I took a picture the other day, but I can't find it. In terms of what Courtney got, I didn't get one email asking for us to spend that money on artificial turf. I didn't get one email asking for it for a fire hall, but I got several emails saying, is the Valley going to use that money towards affordable housing? Those are the emails that I got for how to spend the money for the people that voted us in from throughout the Valley. So that's somewhat where I'm coming from. That's the priority that was identified during the election. Those are the letters that I get, the emails that I get. That's what I heard around this table. And so that's where I'm coming from. Certainly, I support all of the reasons and rationale that Director Arbor provided for South Sewer. Supportive of that. I'm going to eventually benefit from it if it comes in. But I also look at equity, and I think that there are people that are, we need to find ways to equalize, and we don't have that right now because I know a woman who works at the seniors facility who sleeps in her sister-in-law's rec room, and the kids come running in because she can't afford to rent because she's a single person. So, you know, this is the reality, and these are the emails that I'm getting. And so that's where I'm coming from with this. And it certainly is no disrespect to the intention and of South Sewer and obviously the reconciliation piece around that. And I would love to see some housing for Comox First Nation members that they can afford as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Director Grant.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just wondering, with regards to Edwin's comments, do the 3 electoral areas own any infrastructure? And if they do, what could this money actually go to? I mean, this was one of the problems when this fund first came out, was they would give it and it was so restrictive that places like electoral areas couldn't spend it because it was, you didn't own anything, so you couldn't do it. And I noticed that hasn't changed. So I'm just wondering what they would own and what we could actually put that money to if they do.
Through the chair, the projects that we currently have allocated, that's a good example. We have fire halls, the trails, a number of trails, parks. So there is a fair bit of assets and infrastructure that is owned around that area. There is infrastructure in that area that's owned by the CVRD.
Okay, next we have Director Carr.
Yeah, so just for clarity, I don't hear anyone around the table playing geographical isolationism here. We're just talking about how to spend this money in a way that makes sense for the region. You know, if we look at the full grant, again, this is just $1.6 million of the grant. If you look at how the rest of the $4.5 million grant was spent, it was on like rural area projects, Denman Island Fire Hall, Washington Fire Hall, Union Bay Fire Hall, 1.2 million, Denman Island Cross Trail, Goose Pit Trail, Royston Greenway, Seal Bay Nature Park, et cetera, et cetera. So this is just one component of the large thing. And as the interim CAO mentioned, that, you know, the math for this project, as shown on the second page of the appendix, is based on a rural population component and a municipal urban component. So, like, you know, we're having discussions about this, and I just don't think it makes sense to, you know, every time a municipally elected official makes a comment about what about this? We're having a good conversation here. I don't think we need to say, we don't need to pound the table and say, what about the rural areas? We all love the rural areas. Our residents don't really see a difference. Comox residents go to Seal Bay for a walk, and, you know, area B and C residents come to the Comox Recreation Center to work out. So let's just drop that. I think if we have the remaining money to spend on this, it makes sense to put it towards a project that's already going ahead. And that's why I made the decision to make those comments before. I think the South Sewer project is wonderful. Minister Kang was here once. She's coming again, you know, next week to talk about this, and that's wonderful. But in the context of a $60 million grant that it's getting, I'm not certain that we should be spending another $1 million grant towards it. So I'd like to see it go toward a project that's going to be more tangible and quicker. Thanks.
Thank you. Next we have Director Hardy.
Thanks, Chair. I do have a few questions, and I'll direct them through you, and that way it's not personal towards anybody. In regards to the community funds, I'm just wondering again, we still haven't established a regional parks service yet. And I know earlier this evening, we had a delegation come in and talk about Kentwood Park and whether there's ability to have some of those funds go towards the acquisition of that park moving forward. So I'm just kind of wondering about that. That's just one comment or question that I have for you. The other one is, I know in the past we've talked about the search and rescue facility, how important that particular organization is to the Comox Valley. That doesn't just serve residents of area A, B, or C, or Cumberland, or Comox, or Courtney. It serves everybody. It serves people that come to the Comox Valley and end up, you know, having to have that organization go out and save them or help them out. So I'm just wondering again, with regards to whether these funds, we haven't talked about it this evening, but I'm throwing it out there again with regards to, could these funds help that particular organization out moving forward?
Just through the chair, if I could just comment on those, the concern with those two projects, they are projects that we haven't flushed out yet. So to absolutely be able to say, yes, it's an eligible project, just becomes a little bit difficult when it is in projects that we already have layered in our financial plan or already established to almost go, like when we're speaking about turf, for example. It's just a little difficult. So yes, we can purchase a park. Do we understand enough details about what was presented tonight in that particular park to say for sure, is it eligible? We would have to look into that. From a search and rescue perspective and the facility that they needed, if this table wanted to move forward to actually build a facility and own it, then yes, it's eligible. If we cannot we cannot flow the money out to the search and rescue in order for them to actually build it. So that's the situation with that particular option.
Thanks, Lucy.
So through the chair then, have we, the CVRD, approached search and rescue with regards to fleshing out some of these details? I know they came forward with a delegation earlier this year. Have we engaged with the search and rescue organization since the delegation? Have we talked about possible properties? Have we talked about the possibility of the CVRD owning some of those assets to help that organization moving forward?
Yeah, Howie Siemens, our manager of emergency programs could speak to that. I know there's been some discussion with search and rescue and their interest around them acquiring their own space and building that space. But Howie, if you've got some more current info.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair to directors, we have been working very closely with the Comox Brown Search and Rescue team. The challenge that we're having right now is actually trying to find a piece of land to build on. So we have allocated some funds over the next 5 years, 100,000, as you know, went through the board, that request. But we are challenged right now. We are looking at different sites, but there's either long delays in getting those rezoned. But we are approaching each of the local governments to try to find some land for them. So that's the biggest challenge we have.
So again, just making sure, it sounds to me that there are details being worked on. We're just, they haven't been completely flushed out as of yet. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. We are looking at a couple of proposals right now. Search and Rescue is leading those conversations with a couple of the communities. But we are working very closely to try to see what options C and D are if those first two don't come to fruition.
Okay, thanks very much. If I could, Chair, another question that I have was in regards to, if I'm understanding correctly, and I agree with some of the comments that Director Warren and McCallum have made with regards to the housing crisis here in the Comox Valley, and trying to find those partnerships and whether the CVRD owns those assets at the end of the day. Is there that ability for, say, for the CVRD to own the building and the city of Courtenay to own the property? So that kind of addresses those issues was a question that I had for staff. Chair.
I think those sorts of questions are all part of the work that the board instructed us to do at the strategic planning, and to understand what the role for the regional district will be in going forward, whether the housing authority is a piece of that, what the existing nonprofits and societies, how they contribute and play their role in the community. So all of those pieces are a part of the work that the board instructed us to do back in June. We are undertaking that work and we're going through that. But I think as Lucy indicated, at this time, knowing the deadline of end of the year for allocating these funds is coming soon, we won't be in a position to be able to say that as you described, possibly that kind of a model or arrangement would be something that the board will land on. We're not going to be at that point to make that decision. So it's possible, but I don't think the timing that this grant provides for us allows us to wait for that information to come forward.
Thanks. And I have one final comment, Chair. And it's no disrespect to Director Hamilton in regards to the costs. And I agree with Director Arbor to a certain degree in regards to the South Sewer extension and whether that's a drop in the bucket with regards to that particular project. Now, it's unfortunate that you were not able to attend the UBCM meeting where we did meet with the Deputy Minister for a Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. And one of the questions that I think the Deputy Minister asked was, how is the CVRD moving forward supporting the Comox First Nation and its treaty initiative? And I think it's really important that we, again, when we look at this particular project, and not just say, again, it's just a benefit to the Comox First Nation, or it's just a benefit to the area residents. I think one of the things that we talked about with the Deputy Minister was the point or the fact of there's direct and indirect benefits to a lot of the folks in the Comox Valley when we start talking about treaty. And if we look at the development of that property down there, not only does it benefit the residents of Area A and the Comox First Nation, but let's don't kid ourselves. There's a lot of City of Courtenay businesses that are going to benefit from those activities being undertaken down there. There's going to be benefits to the village of Cumberland through Slag Lumber. There's Home Hardware. There's Home Depot. There's several contractors that live in Comox, Courtenay, and the village of Cumberland that are probably going to go to work because of that particular project. There's contractors that are going to turn around and put that infrastructure in place and maintain that infrastructure at the end of the day. There's going to be folks from the CVRD that are going to be doing maintenance and monitoring of that infrastructure. So that puts people to work there. So I think it's really important that we take into consideration of those direct and indirect benefits to everybody here in the Comox Valley. And maybe for just a moment, we put aside our thoughts that we're only looking after the best interests of the city of Courtenay or the village of Comox or Cumberland or area A, B, or C. I think when we come into this boardroom, we come in with our CVRD boardroom hats, not a city of Courtenay hat, not a village of Cumberland hat, not a town of Comox hat, but we come in here as a team. I think that's one of the things that we need to take into consideration here this evening, based upon some of the comments that I've heard so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. Lots of things have been said, none by me yet. But it's fairly clear from the discussion that we don't have a consensus at the table. I've heard 4 distinct proposals. The recommendation as presented, putting all the money into one project, looking into the possibility of devoting a significant chunk of the money, the $1 million, to housing, and looking at some other projects that might be eligible. So I think it makes sense that we defer this issue tonight, that we get a bit more information from staff on some of the possibilities that have been raised, and that we also have an opportunity to think about it over the course of the next few weeks. We've got time, and I don't see there being a consensus here tonight. There's also a couple of developments that are taking place in the community that might help to influence our decision, including a meeting that the city of Courtenay has with BC Housing on the 25th of this month. The possibility that something may emerge with search and rescue from some initiatives that are going on. I think it's quite possible that if we put this off for a couple of weeks, we'll have maybe some clearer options to consider and to get a better consensus. Thanks.
Thank you. And Director Grant?
Yeah, thank you. So I think another thing to remember is that this isn't the end of the line for this money. There'll be more next year. We've been getting this grant for a long time, and I can't imagine that they'll stop giving it. So if your project is not ready or it's not in a place where it could be, it can always come back next year and be put on the list for that too. So I think we're all thinking in terms of, well, we got to do this, we got to do that. You know, if you're not going to be building a turf field till next year, you could always get the money then, for example. So
I think you're confusing the grant with another.
Sorry, I just want to clarify this Growing Communities Fund.
Oh, okay, sorry.
This is the fund that was announced to us last springtime. It was the $1 billion fund from the province.
Oh, okay, all right. So
And it was a
all right.
one-time commitment. So,
Sorry about that.
but if you know something we don't know, then
Well, I do, but I'll be retiring in Hawaii with that.
There's an election coming.
And Director Arbor?
Yeah, thanks. And in regards to possible deferral, maybe because as Dr. Hillian underlined, we're not a consensus and we have time until December 31st. I would almost suggest that we don't take 2 weeks, but that we take the time and just put it on our December meeting. And by then we'll have probably most of the information that we need in regards to all the different projects that were mentioned. We're going to have a recreation meeting. We're going to have a strategic meeting around the regional parks. We're going to have information from Courtenay around the housing situation. So I would say, I'm not sure how much more information we'll have in a couple of weeks. I would just say, let's just push it to December unless staff sees a problem with that.
Thanks. Director McCollum is next.
Yeah, it's gone around so many times, I've almost forgot what my comments were. I was just reading to the end of all these attachments and kind of refreshing my memory on how this has gone. And it looks as though we need to decide what where we're allocating these funds, but do we have to have the project fleshed out or just the service identified? Because in reading this letter, it seems as though it's more service related than specific project. So just wanting a bit of clarification. I'm thinking in terms of Director Hardy's question around the park service, if we don't necessarily know where we want to spend that money, but that it would exist in that service or something like that.
I think through the chair, I think in my opinion and what I read, they've given us some fairly good leeway in this particular grant. So as I gave thought to how pinned down do we have to have an initiative around something that's non-market housing, for example, I think by December 31st, I think we, coming from the board, that we should have an initiative named and to be able to describe what it is that we are looking for in that particular initiative. Do I think across the 5 years, if it doesn't go the way that we're imagining at this time of year, and we need to be giving them a call and saying, hey, we need to shift this a little bit to this, are they going to insist we give them the funds back? Probably not. So in my mind, I'm thinking about what our reporting requirements are at the end of the year, that we have to report and say, what is it that we are allocating these funds in? There's got to be enough clarity there to say we are using this for this. We want to be using this for this purpose and be able to describe it to a certain extent. But there's a fair bit of leeway in what they're giving us with this particular grant.
Okay, yeah, thanks. That's helpful. And I just wanted to make the final comment that when we kind of held off on deciding on this last piece of the Growing Communities Funds, it was my recollection or interpretation from that discussion that it was really around what we saw in the formula as being allocated for the entire region. And so my expectation was when we got a recommendation back that it would be on projects that were like across the service or across the regional district. So I mean, I recognize that maybe some of my comments do sound as though I'm pitting against one region and that we want more benefits specifically for Courtenay, but just to reframe that, that's not really my intention. I would like us to, if we put these funds aside, saying that these were the portion of the Growing Communities funds that were meant to be of regional impact, then I was expecting recommendation for projects that look that way. And to me, the South Sewer is just, it's very specific to one side. And I actually found Director Hardy's comments around, there is actually a lot of regional impact from if this goes ahead in terms of economic development and, the potential for regional support for a treaty process. And I do value that. So I don't want to diminish that, but based on the conversations that we've had at the board leading up to this decision, that was just not where I expected this to land. So I'll leave it at that.
Lucy, do you want to comment?
Just super quickly, for sure. Just going back to the purpose of the grant, it did not have to be split that way. Along the road and the discussions and whatnot, that is the direction of this board, was to allocate some out to our rurals and electoral, and then yes, come back to that regional. And just as you've described, I suppose all I wanted to say, those three projects in our mind as staff from a recommendation perspective are regional, and it's been I think described very well by Director Arbour and Director Harvey around the why. That putting that line in the ground is going to support regional benefit in multiple different ways as they've described. So yes, it is in staff's mind, it is regional. Okay.
Thank you. And before we put forward a motion of deferral, just want to go to staff and make sure that they have the information that they need on what would be needed to come back.
Yeah, I think what I've heard is confirmation around that stacking possibility with other senior government grants, and confirming that that's not going to be a barrier for us. As other projects evolve and more information becomes available, that could be information that we introduce to help the board make their decisions. And that would just take some time, but we may not have all that information by the end of the year. So I do want to just put that out there, that we still might not have every piece of information that everybody's looking for. We can take another look at the housing piece, though, although the ownership of the asset, I think, is a really important piece there. So just understanding what that eventuality might be, because I think the grant is very clear that the allocation is important by the end of this year. The expenditure of the funds is important within 5 years. So yes, there could be some flexibility from the province, but we also want to be mindful of where the board is at in our own consideration for the services that we're going to be delivering. I think that's probably what I have.
And just
And Lucy?
going to the board about whether they also want to include the information around the possible purchase of parks. Was that something that we wanted staff to bring back as well?
Might as well include it.
Yeah, okay.
And Lucy, did you have something else to?
I think the only thing that I wanted to add is what concerns me is if you're wanting us to go down that road of collaborations with the other municipalities. Because it was a discussion in the direction at the onset of this, and that hasn't occurred, and there hasn't been there hasn't been we haven't gotten together to talk about things like that. It hasn't progressed in that way. So that's what worries me in this short time period that's left. Is to get down that road where we're doing something together. However, that's not to say that a CVRD board that we're walking down the road to do something in that space on our own as well.
Okay, thank you. So we'll need support from the municipalities, is what you're saying, to make that happen within the timeframe we have. Director Arbour.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to just show support for what Lucy said. I think the expectation of our board is staff will do their best effort, and on our end, we'll know that it's decision time in December and that we will have to reach consensus. So, I think we can collectively achieve all that for staff to put in the best effort and for us to reach consensus one way or the other when there's just a couple of weeks left. So, but I think it does open a couple of months. I think that's a good amount of time to explore some of the issues and some of the projects being described by the coordinator reps. I don't know, right? You just don't know if there's, like Dr. Hardy said, like, is there a real opportunity or is it, something that's may or may not happen. So yeah, I think I'm satisfied and I'm actually hopeful and thankful. I mean, it's funny, right? Because the province gives us all this money and then we struggle with it. But at the end of the day, I'd like to have that problem again next year, as Director Grant said.
Okay, and did you want to put forward the motion then? Oh, right. We're still on receipt, so all in favor of receipt? And that's carried unanimously. And Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. I move that we defer this issue to an early December meeting for a staff report on further options.
Moved by Hillian, seconded by Arbour. And the only other debatable thing is time and place. So if nobody has an issue with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Oh, were you opposed, Director Graves?
On principle.
Of deferral? Okay. Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, so moving on. That was a long one. We're moving on to extreme weather response shelter request. Moved by Hillian, seconded by Grant, and over to staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lisa Kilpatrick, our Community Development and Resilience Manager, will be presenting the staff report. And I want to recognize that Angela Fletcher, the coordinator with the Comox Valley Coalition to End Homelessness, is also in the gallery. And Lisa, over to you.
Great, thanks. Through the chair to the directors. So the report that we have brought to you today is to bring awareness and request for a significant issue that our community is facing right now, to identify a shelter space for this winter for the extreme weather response needed. Despite the concerted efforts of the coalition leadership team and membership to identify a space since, I believe, the closure of last year's space, a space has not been identified. And so we are looking for some support, financial support, to provide incentive maybe, and much needed resources to hopefully secure a space or to be able to identify an option for folks to be housed during inclement weather. And I'm just looking outside right now, and we're hoping for something by November 1st, but today probably would have been good too. So what I want to do as well is just provide an update. So since this report was sent out, Mayor Bob Wells did call a meeting on Friday that CVRD, the municipalities, Comox First Nation 19 Wing, and the Coalition to End Homelessness leadership team was a part of, and to basically mobilize efforts in the community to identify a space, and the more people that are working on this issue and to help what could be a dire situation, I think, for the winter, the better. So we are also working on a communications plan to alert the community to this issue, and to present a call to action to potentially identify space through the community that way. But Angela's here to answer any questions. The report provides three recommendations. One is to utilize funding that we have as a carry forward from funds that were earmarked for the strengthening communities funds, at the 91,000 that I think most of you are aware of, as well to provide staff the jurisdiction to provide that grant to the nonprofit that will be identified. Once a space has been identified, a nonprofit can be identified to apply for the extreme weather response shelter funding from BC Housing. And then the third is an advocacy role, and to provide a letter advocating for the creation of a permanent shelter space, additional permanent shelter space here in the Comox Valley. So we'll open to any questions.
Thanks, Lisa. Could you, or do you know, I guess, some of the parameters around what the requirements of this space would be?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, so we'd be working with BC Housing. So whatever space is located, we would need the fire chief to come through to be able to let us know, one, if it's safe enough, and two, how many people would be allowed to reside in that space overnight. So working really closely. BC Housing does pay for some things like stuffing and some food, but they don't pay for rent and they don't pay for security. And so that is some of the requests that we've brought forward within that $91,000. I'm sure it's within that report, but we're thinking that there's probably 75 to 100 people that are looking for support in addition to the current shelter space. So we are just looking at ways to accommodate that many people, recognizing that it might be difficult to do in one space. So just looking, asking the community if potentially we can look for two different spaces. And so just depending on how many people those hold, it depends on how much staffing we have to hire and who we collaborate with to make that happen.
Okay, and the hours that would be expected?
We're hoping for a minimum of 8 p.m. to 8 a.m.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
There's some flexibility around that though.
Okay, thank you so much, Angela.
Of course.
And Director McCollum, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the work on this. This is really important, and I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to find a solution to this issue. It doesn't seem like it's a very straightforward one, and there seems to be a lot of complicating factors. So just want to acknowledge the work that's being done. I had a question around the operation of it and it's an unidentified nonprofit organization, because we haven't really been able to flesh out any details, I assume, but like, is there capacity? Is this part of the conversation in addition to the spaces, having an operator or a partner in place that can, get staff trained up and be able to execute an operation like this in a pretty short order if we're successful in finding a shelter space?
Yeah, you bet. Just like the previous 2 years, we'll be working with Nicole Morrison, Consulting and Outreach and Community Care's Peer Outreach. And also, depending on the spaces that that are located, can reach out to other agencies to see how they'd like to support as well.
Great, that's good to hear. And then the other question I had is, I've understood from some of the dialogue in the community is where, we're willing to consider just about anything that would meet the need. We may not be able to be super choosy about the exact location, just given the constraints. And so if it ends up that we are able to identify a suitable space, but it's not centrally located and people do need to be shuttled or bused, does BC Housing provide any funding for that or security, or would that all have to be funded from the allocation?
As far as I know, we'll have to be looking for funding for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any further lights. So we're on receipt. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Recommendation moved by Hillian, seconded by Arbor. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Angela. Thanks, Lisa. And 7 is the Residential Emissions Reduction Action Plan. And moved by Grieve and seconded by Arbor. And we'll. Oh, actually, there is food, but we've been. Let's see what we have for the rest of the agenda here. Are you guys feeling like you need a break, or would you like to push through? Yes, a break?
Yeah.
Oh,
I vote for break. We're gonna do it differently.
okay. Sorry, guys. I guess we're gonna have a break and we'll come back. So yeah, we'll come back at 6 o'clock.
local governments with greater abilities to measure and regulate residential emissions in new construction. It is comprised of 4 levels, each carrying stricter requirements, and is a program that local governments can adopt voluntarily. Recently, the City of Victoria, City of Nanaimo, and District of Saanich have adopted the Zero Carbon Step Code. The action plan focuses on all of this, outlining 6 strategies with associated actions aimed at retrofits, new construction, and building capacity and education. The first strategy focuses on supporting actions to accelerate the phase out of fossil fuels for primary heating systems through rebates for electric heat pumps. From identifying houses that rely on fossil fuel heating appliances, particularly oil-heated homes, to developing and advertising additional financial supports for retrofits, this is an important step in reducing residential emissions. Through the work done in support of the Transition 2050 and RERAP reports, it became clear that there is a data gap, particularly for oil-heated homes, and creating an inventory would bridge this gap. As a local example, the City of Victoria recently hired summer students to canvass neighborhoods to identify these oil-heated houses, resulting in effective and targeted promotions. Strategy 2 focuses on exploring municipal financing programs' best practices, similar to the PACE program. BC has still not enabled legislation that would permit the PACE program itself, so some local governments have developed their own pilot programs, such as the District of Saanich. Staff see value in learning from our colleagues and finding out the value added for offering a local program in addition to existing provincial and federal offerings, such as the low income qualifying program by Clean BC and 0% financing offer from the Canada Greener Homes loan. More research and analysis is required in order to understand whether a municipal financing program is needed or if this would be a duplication of services that already exist. As previously directed, staff are earmarking January 4th for the launch of Home Energy Navigator, a retrofit concierge program to be administered by City Green Solutions for residents of Comox Valley's electoral areas. Staff have allocated funds from the local government climate action program to fund this. Staff have also been engaging with member municipalities throughout the development of RERAP, and the concierge program has been built in such a way that the municipalities can easily join if there is funding and/or interest. As another local example, in September, the Regional District of Nanaimo launched Home Energy Navigator. They've similarly built the program in such a way that their member municipalities can join, recognizing that a regional program will have a greater impact. The following strategy focuses on resource sharing through an intergovernmental climate action working group. Convening this working group involving local government professionals will enable continuous learning by sharing resources, best practices, and lessons learned. And this could also be helpful in terms of identifying ways to leverage LGCAP funds in a more regional manner. Strategy 5 focuses on promoting clean energy opportunities or requirements in new construction. As I mentioned earlier, in May of this year, the province introduced the Zero Carbon Step Code as an additional pathway to reduce emissions in new construction. Different from the Energy Step Code, which focuses specifically on energy efficiency, the Zero Carbon Step Code focuses on reducing residential emissions in new construction through electrification and decarbonization. Some local governments, such as the City of Nanaimo and District of Saanich, have recently adopted the Zero Carbon Step Code as a mechanism to accelerate the phase out of fossil fuel primary heating in new construction. As local governments have jurisdiction over their building bylaws, new construction provides again a simpler and more cost-effective way to reduce emissions from residential buildings on a community level. And lastly, up until recently, current requirements for new constructions have focused on energy efficiency without directly addressing the issue of GHG emissions. Since natural gas is still a dominant low-cost energy source for buildings, efficiency requirements alone are not enough to meet our climate targets, which is the main impetus for the province's introduction of the Zero Carbon Step Code. Building capacity amongst industry professionals, local governments, including ourselves, and homeowners will increase capacity for low carbon systems in new construction, helping to work towards meeting our GHG emission reduction targets. Through established peer networks, staff are also able to identify partnerships
for joint events, as many local governments are pursuing similar initiatives. Keeping all of this in mind, staff are recommending that the Residential Emissions Reduction Action Plan be approved and that strategies 1, 3, 5, and 6 be prioritized for implementation, as these strategies take most advantage of new or emerging trends and opportunities to reduce residential emissions. Strategies and actions would be implemented where possible under the current 2023 to 2027 financial plan, and additional consideration would be given to RERAP during the 2024-28 financial planning process. Staff will also bring additional reports to the Electoral Area Services Committee or the board on the implementation of certain actions as directed or required. Thank you very much for your time, and both Robin and myself are available to answer any questions.
Great, thank you so much for the report. Are there any questions? Director Cole-Hamilton?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And thank you so much for this report. Some of you may know that I've spent a little bit of time over the last couple of years trying to get more tools for local governments on building decarbonization, including the ability to set GHG limits on new and existing buildings, and also to get a PACE program in place. As you point out, there's been some victories there. The implementation of a PACE program is in the roadmap to 2030, but it hasn't hit the ground yet, and we're still waiting. And the alternative, the one that Central Saanich has adopted, is laborious. It requires a separate bylaw for every single property that's going to accept the program. So it's a very arduous workaround, and continuing to lobby the province on actually picking up the pace and actually getting the policy implemented. But the piece that has materialized is the zero carbon step code. We now have that tool, that ability to regulate carbon in new buildings. And as you point out, there's little point in creating buildings which are then going to need retrofits in very short order in order to make them compliant. So I know we're just on receipt at this point, but when we get to the point of moving the recommendation, I have one small amendment to strategy number 5, and I just want to, after new construction, I would just like to add, with a priority of determining how the zero carbon step code could be utilized to meet our 2050 GHG reduction target. I think it's you're asking us to help focus, and I appreciate you focusing us just on these 4 strategies. And with strategy 5, I'd just like to take it to that extra degree of focus. Anyway, just once again, thank you for this incredibly detailed and comprehensive plan on how we're going to get this work done. And I'll make the motion when we get to that point. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we have Director Arbour.
Yeah, thanks. And some good observation by Dr. Cole-Hamilton on being more precise around the best way to reach the targets. I think first of all, yeah, I will echo that this is really great to see this plan back. Thoughtful work by staff around all the different ways that society can stop failing around actually meeting targets. We've had 30 years of climate knowledge and setting targets, and we keep failing. And I think this puts us on a more likely path to actually make a difference. I'd like to acknowledge that, on first blush, it's not going to be easy in our respective jurisdictions, because it's one thing, I think, to set this plan in motion at the board, but I want to recognize that one of the things I'm already advocating for the rural areas, when you talk about decarbonizing energy in homes, a lot of what you'll hear from residents is, yeah, but we get a lot of power outages. So even in the meeting with the province last month, I brought up, that was in regards to fiber optic infrastructure, which we're burying on Hornby and Denman. But I'm starting to talk openly about Canada opening up programs and BC opening up programs to bury hydro lines in rural areas to minimize the risk of long outages. And so I think it's going to require us to continue advocating to the province a lot on different types of policy in rural areas for this main policy to work in our rural area. In the municipalities, I want to commend the city of Corney with their latest OCP and how they're going about with the step code. And it's just, I'm hoping that staff will be able to solution, especially for rural areas, how that can be deployed and implemented in our context. Overall, I think we have, I think it's our duty to kind of jump in and I think one of the things that will be most appreciated with my residents will be on the short term is the home energy retrofit concierge program. A lot of people struggle with knowing where to start from. And I think to have that in-house capacity will be very valuable. And I expect many of residents area A and probably B and C are going to come and ask for advice, guidance, and support. So yeah, overall, really good plan, really good work. And I think I support Dr. Cole Hamilton's suggested motion around being more specific around how the zero carbon can help us reach the targets. Thanks.
Next, we have Director McCollum.
Thanks, Sharon. Thanks for the report. It's great to see this work coming forward. It was also really interesting to have the casting back aspect of the report and just kind of where we've set our goals and where we're needing to put more energy into and some suggestions in how we get there. I think it's really well laid out. I had a few questions around that. One of the things that popped out for me, so I found it really interesting that like home heating oil is almost the equal amount of emissions in from residential as natural gas, even though it's a much smaller proportion of home heating. And I'm just wondering if you could comment on whether or not there's an opportunity to really focus on that type of retrofit. They tend to be in homes that are older and have more need of retrofit than just a fuel switching as well. And it's more expensive to pull out that type of furnace and removing an oil tank, especially if it's inside of a home. Because it occurs to me that, we could take out half as many of those and reach a 3% reduction in carbon emissions, even if it's not 3% of homes. So I just want to know if that's been considered and what some ideas would be around really supporting those conversions as a priority.
Through the acting CEO to Director McCollum, this has definitely been a priority of ours. And as Dylan mentioned in his presentation, there really is a gap in terms of our understanding of where these homes are. Listening to our colleagues in Victoria and Saanich, we know that it has been absolutely key to find out where these homes are. And we're hoping to undertake a similar exercise where we would have either summer students or staff surveying the neighborhoods and find out where these homes are, so we can really focus on targeted programs or promotions that would really help these people through retrofits. They would be able to take advantage of the home energy navigator and being able to understand what other retrofits would help them in terms of making the efficiency changes in their homes. Yeah, you're absolutely right, though, that oil is a very big GHG emitter. And so it's really important that we take this next step in finding where these homes are. And it would be a great opportunity to be able to partner with our municipalities, recognizing that they're homes in the city of Courtenay, town of Comox, and the village of Cumberland.
Yeah, that's a great comment. The collaboration piece is going to be critical for moving these initiatives forward. It can't just happen from one organization.
Yeah, and sorry, I'll just finish. I'll just add that through our community GHG emissions inventory, this piece was really identified that the other municipalities do not have any sort of archival information on this. So it was really at that point we realized it wasn't just us who didn't have this information.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Especially given, you have to disclose that when you sell a home. There's the issues around buried tanks, and yet we don't really know which homes have that type of heating. So yeah, obviously there's some opportunity there for some improvement. The other question I had was just in the financial factors, it's outlined that it would be approximately $425 per home to benefit from this program. And while I haven't used the program myself, I know of other people who have used the Canada Greener Homes Grant, and there is a requirement for like an energy audit in order to qualify for that granting. And I'm wondering if this program that we're looking to initiate would also meet that Canada Greener Homes granting requirement, like if residents would be able to kind of use that information and then also go and qualify for that grant, or if they would still be required to do that extra administrative step, because I know that that is a barrier for people accessing that program.
Through the acting CO to Director McCullum, my understanding is that the home energy navigator who they would be speaking with is an energy advisor, but not the same that would be in terms of meeting the qualifications of the Canada Greener Home program. They would be different, but there are rebates available for that actual service, and so they're meant to be complementary. So I'm sure they could work together.
I see. Yeah, I as you're explaining that, I am kind of cluing in that one is kind of more about helping homeowners through the bureaucratic steps, and the other one is like the physical audit of a home.
Yeah, exactly. They help them walk through quotes in terms of identifying whether there's other rebate opportunities, making sure they're eligible, and trying to see them through from beginning to end in that process.
Yeah, that sounds very useful. As we go forward, there seems to be layers and layers and layers of potential. And yeah, I see that there's a lot of value in just getting that information easily accessible for people that are wanting to make these changes in their homes. And then the last comment I wanted to make was just around strategy 2 in the report, around that financing piece, financing available for homeowners, and just picking up on the comments that Director Cole Hamilton said, that it's not identified in our strategy, but I think it would be worth including is the advocacy piece. There's been a lot of advocacy, as was already talked about, from the political level, but if that's also happening at a staff level to the province, I mean, any way we can get this work prioritized will have a big benefit to the goals outlined in this report. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we have Director Grieve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you can probably imagine, in the rural areas, we're kind of lukewarm to this whole conversation. But I think that, first of all, for reasons that Director Arbor alluded to, the fact that we do lose our hydro out there, we don't have a lot of gas lines in the rural areas, not in Area C. I think they're mostly concentrated in the denser urban areas. But I am very happy to see that that we're bringing back some more of the passive systems, like that 10-20% of the heat loss in your house is through cracks and windows and doors and pretty basic stuff. I mean, you don't need to have a PhD to go and fix that stuff. So it's you can do an awful lot with very little. The other issue I think I have is that I just recently went and bought a bunch of R40 insulation for my shop extension, and it was about $1,700, And what is astounding to me was at one time working in the building supply, anything like that and caulking and whatever was all tax-free. Now they're taxing it. So the government is speaking out of both sides of its mouth. They're getting revenue from it because they're taxing it and it's still promoting it. So, there's it's a bit of a, it's very contradictory. But the other thing, of course, is rather than beating people over the head with a stick, I think that they'll come, as far as the market goes, they're going to come to realize that that modernizing your heating system, it only makes sense, dollars and cents. I'm getting a heat pump, and the heat pumps now are so much more efficient. They're good to 17 below. It draws 15 amps. Which is about the same as your toaster. It's not like the old days. And if you have a wood stove, and I'm not taking my wood stove out, but it's nice to have, but it doesn't need to be the primary source anymore, because if you buy a cord of wood, you're pretty well $400 a cord. And then you have to, split it and store it and cart it in and clean up after it, whatever. So, I think the market's going to adjust to this stuff. It's going to take a while, but we're definitely heading in the right direction. So I guess not so much a question, just the fact that, it does seem a little ironic that the province is making it's playing both sides of the fence here when they could just make things a little cheaper for the homeowner. Like I say, out of that installation, I probably paid $300 in taxes. Go figure. So I'd say not so much a question, but definitely a really good report, and Robin and Dylan. So thank you so much for bringing this to the table.
Thank you. Next, we have Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. I will take this opportunity to apologize to colleagues and staff that I have to leave early tonight for a family commitment. I did want to ask, though, I was interested in the fourth option here that didn't make the cut because it had an element of citizen engagement. And I always think that if we have that opportunity to bring citizens of the community into the process, so much the better. And I'm just wondering if you see any other opportunities in this program or others that we're doing along those lines to whether as an advisory committee or to help with implementation, volunteer youth, whether there's any opportunity in that regard. Thanks.
Through the chair to Director Hillian, Strategy 6 still does incorporate building capacity with the community, and this would be really focusing on the zero carbon step code and really moving towards that electrification. But I also wanted to highlight that we are also embarking on a climate action strategy. And as a part of that strategy, we will be engaging with the community. There will be an opportunity for interest groups, whether that be youth interested in climate, to participate in that process. And it is our intention that that strategy will be setting a bit of a framework in order to set priorities when it comes to climate action work. So stay tuned for that.
Thanks, Robin. Next, we have Director Arbor.
Thanks, Chair. And yeah, I just remembered this wonderful presentation we had from the Denman Climate Action Group recently as well. So I thought I would comment on that because I'm sure they'll be tuning in. And maybe that'll be my question for staff is obviously I actually saw Ben Gesselbrack, Councillor Gesselbrack in Nanaimo last week, and I congratulated him on Nanaimo moving forward or the zero step code. But how do you imagine some of those initiatives coming back, say to ESC or to our different municipalities? I guess it is the responsibility of each jurisdiction to go forward, but specifically with rural areas, do you see yourself bring a report back to us to see what a roadmap to implementation to zero carbon could look like? Is that something we could anticipate coming out of this work?
Through the chair to Director Arbor, the building bylaw is currently in the process of being updated. There could be an opportunity to bring a staff report forward to ESC to essentially outline what the adoption of the zero carbon step code would look like in the rural areas. There has been a lot of engagement with industry that we can learn from in the municipalities that have moved forward with this, the city of Nanaimo, the city of Victoria, but also most recently, the municipality of North Cowichan, which represents our community a little bit more. So I think there's a lot of learnings that we could borrow from our colleagues, but we could definitely bring forward a staff report that would outline what those concerns that we might hear from the development community and also homeowners, and really to understand what those impacts could be, whether it be costing or looking at those low carbon systems.
That's great. Thanks. I would only comment that for me, if anyways, I have a superficial knowledge around the implementation of step code in a way, but I know in the rural areas, we haven't moved significantly on it yet. And if you're going to go a step to educate people, why not go to the final destination? So that'll be the kind of comments I'll probably reserve for ESC, but I'm glad to know that that's one of the outputs we'll get from this plan is more information for the three of us to look at in the future.
Sorry, I would also just like to add a big part of our work is going to be debunking a lot of the myths that are out there that we are hearing. And that is a lot about, whether there's power outages. And so I think it's really important that we understand that we're talking about new construction and homes are being built very efficiently. They're able to carry these homes through power outages. And so part of the work that we're going to be doing is really making sure that that's a part of the message that we're sharing with the community.
Great, thank you. Director Kerr.
Thank you, and thanks for the report and all the work that went behind it. I guess two-part question, kind of a little bit of past, a little bit of future. So in putting the report together, was there any conversations that took place with the CVRD and the municipalities and their staff? And then going forward, let's say this gets approved, then what's the next steps, especially specifically around, if I look at this, thinking about having this as a regional initiative involving the CVRD and the municipalities, are there conversations that would take place in the future between staff of the jurisdictions, and how do you see that going forward? Thanks.
Through the chair to Director Kerr, I really see the Intergovernmental Climate Action Group being the vehicle for those conversations. As a part of the development of this action plan, we met with the member municipalities to try and identify whether there was already projects that were in progress or whether there was alignment with work plan priorities, and we really did find a lot of synergies. And I think it's really just continuing that work to continue the collaboration, the coordination. I think a key piece of this could be really identifying opportunities to leverage the LG CAP funds. And the Home Energy Concierge Program is a good example of that, of where we could all be putting in our funds to work on something that would impact the entire community. The member municipalities, we met with them last week, and we're definitely exploring opportunities for partnership.
Great. Thanks so much. And I don't see any further lights. So we're on receipt. And vote of full board, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And Director Cole-Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I guess I'd start by moving the recommendation, and then once that's been seconded, then I'd put my light on again and move an amendment. If that's
Since
Okay.
you're moving it, you can start out with the amended motion, and then it won't be
Okay.
an amended motion. It'll just
perfect.
be the
Then
motion.
we'll start off with the motion that's on the screen. I emailed it to Jake, and it's right there. So I will move the recommendation as stated there. And reseconded. Thank you.
Okay, moved by Cole-Hamilton, seconded by McCollum. Any further discussion? Okay. Oh, Director Hardy, go ahead.
Yeah, just one comment or concern. And I know a number of the constituents in Area B are the 60 somethings. And if we're looking at doing these retrofits, et cetera, down the road, I guess the concern is it's not so much putting in a heat pump as much as now you got to put in new electrical work. So everything's up to date with code. And then while you're doing that, there's additional costs that end up falling in line. So it's not just the cost of replacing the heat or putting in a new heat pump. I guess the concern that I have here is, again, the cost associated with implementing this plan moving forward to folks that are out in the rural areas that are on a fixed income, and how are we dealing with that? So I just put forward the question or comment, and I know we're not going to save the world's problems today, but again, I think it's something that we need to take into consideration when we're saying, yeah, let's move forward on this particular project or program. Thanks.
Yeah, over to staff.
I would just suggest that this recommendation and the rewrap program as is presented, it's not obligatory or mandatory that people must undertake retrofits, and a lot of the components of it are about identifying equity and opportunity for individuals. So point well made, I think, and that's certainly a piece of how this program will roll out. Even more so because equity is one of your drivers now.
I could have a follow-up, Chair, and thank you for clarifying that for me, James. I think it's really important that whatever the vote ends up being, that we make sure we communicate that to our constituents at the end of the day, that, like you said, this isn't a requirement that you have to do this, but here's an option available to you. And quite often I think people just hear, oh my gosh, the government's forced me to do a retrofit, jump up and down. So I just want to make sure that if that's not the case, that we communicate that quite clearly to our constituents. Thanks.
Thanks. Next, we have Director Cole-Hamilton.
Yeah, and I just want to thank Director Hardy for highlighting that. I think that is a concern that many people have, and I think it's, again, important to note that there's nothing mandatory here. And I know the regional district has, and through my other work, Help Cities Lead, I'll continue to advocate for the implementation of a PACE program, so it becomes entirely affordable for people when they choose to make a retrofit, to have a program that's there to support them. So I think that needs to be, equally important, is letting people know that nothing is required of them, and that we're out there to try and make it more affordable and using every tool we have to advocate to the province for that. So thank you.
Director Morin.
At the risk of being repetitive, I just wanted to thank Director Hardy for bringing that up, because I think, we're trying to, I think, in supporting climate action, we always need to look at the social equity piece, and that it's very having the ability to retrofit and to to do all kinds of practices in a climate friendly way. It can be a very privileged position, and so I think we always have to look at that, and I'm thankful that we do have that equity lens now, so that we can always be looking at that when we're making these decisions. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so we do have the motion on the floor. Any further discussion? It's a vote of the full board. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Great. Thanks, Robin and Dylan. Okay, we're on to item 8, which is CVRD grant status report to August 2023. Moved by Arbor, seconded by McCullum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Kevin DeVille, Manager of Financial Operations, will introduce this staff report and the following staff report. First one's the grant status report, and then that'll be followed by the approved grant budget amendments report. So, Kevin, over to you.
Thank you very much. Through the chair and the acting CAO to the directors, good afternoon. So yes, I'll be introducing the next 2 reports as the acting CAO has suggested, and certainly be available to speak to any questions you may have. So the first report in front of you is our ongoing grant status report, and this is for the period after the adoption of our financial plan back at the end of March through to August 31st. We've presented this in a slightly different format just to make it a bit easier for everyone to read. And as you can see there, we've had a fairly active period of time where we've received confirmation of 12 grant awards over that period of time, resulting in 18 budget amendments that will be presented to you in the next staff report. Obviously, the largest grant in this group is the $30 million to the extension of sewer services south, but also a number of other fairly large and significant grant awards with respect to climate adaptation. Certainly a number related to our community emergency program service delivery, a number that certainly will also impact our park services, and then also a number of grants that are helping to support our emergency services, i.e. our fire departments. So the list is certainly there for your information, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions you might have with respect to any of these grants.
Thank you, Kevin. I don't see any lights, so think you're up to it as far as questions. Oh, no, wait. Director Moran, go ahead.
Sorry, just very quickly. So the grant for the wood smoke reduction program, that bumps up our the amount that we had in the previously.
Yeah, so we do tend to receive an annual allocation of grants towards our wood stove program. So as we kind of go through every calendar year, look at expending those existing dollars, this would be, kind of dollars allocated for 2023. So it just kind of help perpetuate that program going forward.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so it's a vote of the full board. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. And we have the 2023 approved grant budget amendments. Moved by Grant, seconded by Cole Hamilton, and back over to you, Kevin.
Thank you very much again through the chair to the director. So yes, as a result of that previous report, we have a number of budget amendments that we felt we would just kind of bring in en masse for your edification. So, the lion's share of these relate to those grants that we articulated in that previous report. And so we've just provided a sense of how those grants will impact each of those various services. We've provided that in the table format for you. I do want to point out one group of errors, and I do apologize that we didn't catch that prior to the agenda being published. And this is pertaining to the Growing Community Fund grant, specifically at the bottom of that table. We want to just make sure you are aware that these grants were not meant to supplement those projects, but rather were to offset already committed dollars. So in the case of the fire hall projects, for example, that is to offset any debt that we had anticipated to help fund those projects. So we're not actually increasing those budget amounts, but rather reducing the burden to the taxpayer with respect to the debt that was anticipated at that time. So to give you a sense for the Denman Island Fire Hall, that's going to reduce that debt from about 1.7 million by that $850,000. For Mount Washington, that will reduce that debt that was planned at 1.425 million by that 600,000 amount. And then lastly, for Union Bay, that will reduce the anticipated debt that was identified in that project from $3 million less that 1.195. And then with respect to the 3 parks projects, those were being funded within the current financial plan by reserve contributions. So those growing community funds will replace those reserve contributions. So that will allow us to retain those funds for other projects that come forward as part of each of those service budgets as well. So again, apologies for those errors, and hope we can kind of move forward and approve it on that basis. So happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Anyone have any questions on this report of the amendments? Oh, Director Moore.
It's just a cheeky comment. I was actually talking about this report with my son today, who's 26, and I said, you may want to get into either the fire hall construction business or the fire protective gear and equipment business, because I think across the region we have about 5 new fire halls being built. So anyway. It took up quite a large part of the chart here related to fire halls and fire equipment.
Okay, so I don't see any further lights. We're on receipt. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Kevin. And so the next, there was a recommendation, yes. Moved by Cole Hamilton, seconded by Grant, that the 2023 to 2027 adopted financial plan and capital expenditure program be amended to incorporate approved grants as outlined in the staff report. And so vote of the full board. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. So the next item, we anticipated that we would have finished this at a previous meeting, but it wasn't finished, so it actually needs to be referred. Yes. Move to refer to the next in-camera meeting, moved by McCullum and seconded by Director Kerr. Or open meeting.
To an open meeting,
okay.
yeah, and we'll confirm with the board when that will be. it may not be the exact next meeting, it might be a meeting subsequent to that, so.
Okay. Yes, the next or subsequent meeting. Okay, so all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. That takes us to bylaws and resolutions for first, second, and third reading. We have bylaw 793. It's the Comox Valley Exhibition Ground fees and charges, Amendment 6. First and second moved by Arbor, second by Grant. It's for the full board. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Third moved by Arbor, seconded by Grant. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. And we are on to bylaws for adoption. We have bylaw number 794, the Royston Garbage Collection Regulations and Rates bylaw. Moved by Grieve, seconded by Grant. That again is for adoption and a vote of the full board. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried unanimously. And we already voted on item 3 at the beginning of the meeting as we varied the agenda. So that brings us to the end. Yes, move to in camera.